My husband and I were divorcing. I had already prepared the divorce papers. It was because we were slowly drifting apart. We had not been able to have a child after 15 years of marriage. My husband and I have always wanted kids. We were unable to conceive children, despite continued fertility treatment. My husband was not enthusiastic about fertility therapy, and he gradually began to arrive home late from work. And many days he did not come home at all. We had separate bedrooms. My husband didn't like me talking about our children. When we first got married, we always talked about how we wanted to have children as soon as possible. But now, I was going to move out of this house. I finished packing and went outside to have my last dinner. My last meal with my husband would have been that night's dinner, so I made reservations at a fancy sushi restaurant. My husband was supposed to come directly to the restaurant after work. When I arrived at the restaurant, he had not yet arrived. I waited for a while, but he didn't show up. I wondered if his work was taking too long. I thought so and sent him a message, but there was no reply. It was not even read. I tried calling him on the phone, but the line was disconnected. Maybe he was too busy with work to answer the phone. I had no choice but to start eating alone. At that point, a middle-aged couple seated next to me, who I had never met before, talked to me. "Forgive me if I'm wrong. Are you by any chance Daniel's wife?" "So, yes, I am," I nodded. I wondered if they were an acquaintance of my husband's. The husband of the middle-aged couple said, "I knew it, actually. Daniel had shown us a picture of you before. I thought it was you, so I talked to you." "May I ask, what is your relationship with my husband?" When I asked, he narrowed his eyes and said, "Daniel saved our lives." "What do you mean?" I asked again, and the man told me how he met my husband. His name was Henry. Henry lives with his wife and they have no children. They were struggling financially and did not have enough money to have a child. He was working at a factory as a temporary worker. One day, however, the company's business performance declined, and he was cut off from his temporary job. His wife was unable to work due to a chronic illness, and Henry was almost 50 years old. As a result, despite his efforts, he was unable to find a new job. Even if a position was available, he would have failed the application screening and would not have been able to get an interview. He had no choice but to borrow money to cover his living expenses, and eventually, his debts began to mount. Meanwhile, his wife's chronic illness worsened. Despairing of their future, they made the worst possible choice. That was about 5 years ago. They went to a Home Depot and got charcoal briquettes and duct tape, which they used to seal their apartment's windows. Before that, they went to eat at a hamburger chain restaurant as their last supper. When they finished eating and left the restaurant, a man approached them. It was my husband. My husband said to Henry and his wife, "Excuse me, do you have a minute? How about a drink? It's on me." My husband made a drinking gesture with his hand. Henry and his wife followed him, wondering why he was doing this. Henry remembered them saying they'd accept anything as long as they could have one last drink. My husband bought 3 cans of beer and took them to a nearby park. When they sat down on the park bench, my husband opened a can of beer and drank it, gulping it down. He then offered it to Henry. "Please have a drink." Henry opened a can of beer and began to drink as well. They introduced themselves to each other. After that, my husband said quietly, "You should forget about it." My husband was sitting next to them at a hamburger store and heard their conversation. He told them, "If you live, something good will undoubtedly happen to you at some point. Even welfare exists. You can even depend on the government. There's nothing wrong with that. We have all been paying high taxes for a moment like this. At the very least, if you're alive, things will work out. Don't you want to drink beer like this again? I'm sorry. I know that this is none of my business, but now that I've heard your story, I couldn't ignore it." Hearing that story reminded me of something, that I loved that kind and righteous side of my husband. Then Daniel took out his phone and showed them a picture of me. "This is my wife. I love her. I've worked so hard to make my wife happy, but I couldn't make her happy, because I cannot have children. I went to the hospital for tests after more than 10 years of marriage and still not being able to have children. And I found out that it was my fault. Because of me, we can't have children. But my wife wants to have children. She had been saying she wanted to have children ever since we got married. I can't make that wish come true. I was surprised. My husband was hesitant to undergo fertility therapy because he was aware he had an issue. My husband told Henry in tears, "I am not the one who can make my wife happy. She would be happier with another man other than me. But I don't want to leave my wife. What on earth should I do?" When Henry heard this, he told Daniel, "You know, Daniel, a couple can be happy without children. We didn't have children either, but we were happy. We were poor, but we were happy to be together." At that moment, Henry said that he remembered. He remembered their poor but happy life, the life that they had led together. And he decided to start over again. As I listened to his story, I shed tears. Henry said to me, "You know, children are not all there is to married life. Please spend a happy life together with your husband. We were saved by your husband back then, and I managed to find a job while on welfare. I worked hard in an industry where I had no experience, and now we can make a living. Today is our wedding anniversary, and now I can come to a nice restaurant once in a while like this. I heard about this place from your husband. He recommended that we visit the restaurant someday. It is thanks to Daniel that we can enjoy such a wonderful meal." Saying this, Henry asked me to shake his hand. "Please give our best regards to your husband." I shook hands with the couple, finished my meal, and went home. My husband did not show up until the end. There was no contact on my phone either. My husband was not even at home. I tried calling his office, but they said he had already left. I went into his bedroom. I wanted to see if I could find any clues as to where he had gone. His room was already packed, and there was only a computer on his desk. I opened the computer. There I found my husband's diary. I felt bad, but I read the diary. It said, "My wife has asked me for a divorce. I don't want a divorce. But my wife wants children. In order to have children as she wants, she should leave me and be with another man. For her happiness, I decided to accept the divorce." When I read that, I cried again. I didn't want to leave that man to have children. I didn't initiate the divorce because we couldn't have children. I assumed he no longer had feelings for me. We didn't spend much time together and didn't talk much. It was hard for me to have such a relationship. That's why I asked him to divorce me, but I had no idea he still loved me. I couldn't stop crying. I ran out of the house and looked around for any place my husband might have gone. His favorite coffee shop, a friend's house. I even called his parents' house, but he was not there. Maybe he could be at that park. Finally, I went to a park. There he was, sitting alone on a park bench. He was drinking a can of beer and crying. "I finally found you." When I said that, he wiped his tears and turned around. "I guess you did." This was the place where he had proposed to me. "Why didn't you come?" I asked him. "I'm sorry," he said. "I just couldn't go because I knew it would be the end of everything if I did. I didn't reply to your message, and I didn't answer your phone calls because I was afraid it would be the end of everything," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I really don't want to leave you. I'm sorry for being so selfish. I know you won't be happy if you stay with me." I hugged him and said, "That's not true. I'm sorry, but I read your diary." He looked surprised at my words. Then I told him how I met Daniel and his wife at the sushi place. I also informed Daniel that I had discovered he had a problem with not being able to have children. "I don't need to have children as long as I can be with you. I wasn't trying to divorce you because we couldn't have kids. It was because I thought you didn't love me anymore." Then my husband said, "I see. I apologize for making you feel lonely until now. I've avoided you because I was afraid you'd bring up the topic of children. I'm so sorry. I love you. I don't want a divorce. I need you." I need you too. I don't need kids. I just need you to be there for me all the time, and that's all I need."
"Are you sure about that? Are you sure you won't regret it?"
"I won't. Let's forget about the divorce." When I said that, my husband hugged me tightly. Then he said in a tearful voice,
"Thank you. I'm so sorry for not expressing my feelings to you before. I'm so sorry I kept running away from you."
"It's okay, but from now on, please don't hide anything from me." Then we faced each other, held each other's hands, and looked at each other's faces. My husband's face was moist with tears, and he grinned shyly. The wedding ring that had remained on my husband's left hand gleamed brightly. The same one was on my finger too.
"We will be together forever and ever."
We reaffirmed the pledge we made the day he proposed to me. The moonlight glowed on the nocturnal sea visible from the park.